And then we're going to start with Matt Carter and then Eric Liebman on deck. So Matt.
Hey, thank you for allowing me to speak. I've got some numbers that I've been running through my head here. I just, as a background, I spent 34 years as an engineer and was active in the union. And when the union folks get together, they sometimes talk about crappy employers.
Yeah.
But I've never quite seen anything like Portland City Council. I've never seen an employer publicly attack employees, calling them arsonists, racists, all sorts of these things like that. Never seen that before. It's just unbelievable. And while that's only coming from one person, nobody is standing up and saying that that's inappropriate conduct. But we are, if you look at the numbers here, we're down about 200 police. I mean, some people can argue that it's not that, but if you look at the population growth and the crime rates and kind of extrapolate a little bit, you need to hire about 200 new cops. Now, every police officer in Oregon has to go through a thing called Department of Public Safety Standards Training, which is run by the state of Oregon. And they charge $150,000 per person that you send down there. You also pay them to go down there. There is a very high loss rate. Using numbers from the state police, you get about 15% of the applicants you accept actually make it to DPSST. So you're looking at 1,300 or so applicants that you're going to need. $30 million for DPSST training, $10 million or so for wages. I mean, we're looking at a $50 million bill, and it only gets worse every time we cut police budgets. I mean, this thing goes up exponentially. Is there any plan to address this huge deficit before the $50 million deficit becomes a $100 million deficit?
That's a great question, Matt. And frankly, I wouldn't challenge many of those numbers that you shared, although other people's might. And indeed, I think in many ways, the numbers might be a little bit worse than you say. First, let me address the first part of your question. The tone of council. And I hear that. And that's one of the reasons why I ran for office. Frankly, the culture that I saw on the past city council did not reflect the culture that I see out in Portland when I go to the grocery store or my kids' soccer games. And it doesn't frankly reflect, I think, Portland at its best. That's one of the reasons why I got in this race. And certainly since I've been on council, you have never heard me abuse an employee. I'm very much being there trying to model what I think a good public servant and a good public citizen looks like. And I think that the council that we have today collectively operates very differently from some of the past councils that we've seen. At the same time, each member of council is their own person. The people of Portland elected them and they elected them for a reason. So, I also respect that. And although I think this council gets along better than previous councils, it's also the case that sometimes we disagree. I am often, if you'll notice, not every vote on council is a 5-0 vote. I often find myself in the minority on some of these issues, and it's not an easy place to be. I hope that we can disagree, but still be agreeable. So that's the culture piece. In terms of the policy question of the current status of our police department, you're absolutely right. At this point, we do not have enough police officers. I think one of the ironies of this moment in Portland history is that Portlanders want a different kind of policing. I think they want essentially community policing. One of the things I have found that will change the relationship between the public and their police force is when police officers get out of their cars and walk neighborhoods and actually spend time interacting with the public. One of the ironies, though, of this current moment is that our dissatisfaction with policing in Portland has translated into cutting the number of cops that we have there. And ironically, as you cut the number of cops, the opportunities for that kind of engaged community policing disappears. It is absolutely a problem. And then I'll also tell you something, over the past year and a half, we have worked our police bureau kind of to death. People are exhausted. I know there is real fear and frankly panic among some police officers about this summer being like last summer with the protest and the violence. Some of the good news is that I think Portland itself has changed a little bit, so we're much less contentious than we used to be. One of the things I try to do anytime people express dissatisfaction with the current state of our police department is I kind of challenge people to go, you know, if you really want to be a police reformer, I really challenge you to think about a career in public safety. And I do
Exactly.
hope that, you know, some of these people out there, especially these young people who are idealistic, I don't question their motives, actually consider, taking up some of the most challenging work that we see in the city. So all of that's, so, those are some of the things I'm doing. And then there's this sort of nuts and bolts bureaucratic problem of how do we bring more police officers online. It's both a budgetary challenge and it's also just a mechanical challenge. As you mentioned, it takes an awful lot of time to train a police officer. It takes an awful lot of money. There are lots of bottlenecks there. One of the things that this council did in its last budget is I think we set aside about $4 million that essentially speeds up the rate at which we can hire new police officers. One of the things I'm very focused on at this moment is that frankly, I think our current and most important bottleneck in terms of bringing new police officers online is getting people through background investigations. We literally don't have enough investigators out there, just kind of making sure that the people that we're taking into the department are the kind of people that you want to have in the department. So I'm working with the mayor's office to try to see if we can come up with some innovative ways just to get people through clearance more often. It's also a political problem. Ultimately, I think one of my biggest challenges here is to go to Portlanders and actually convince them that we need to invest in policing. I think there's a real possibility that within the space of the next year and a half, 2 years, we could have a police department that has about 850 sworn officers, which is basically where we were in the 1980s. We were a much smaller town. And one of the other truths there is that if you want to have the kind of police force that I think most Portlanders want, a police force where people get out of their cars and actually interact with the public and try to work together with the community to solve crime, you need a lot more bodies. So I would say that we're not down 200 police officers. I think we're in danger of being down 800 police officers. That is a daunting challenge. One of the things we got to do is just begin to restore trust. We have to just be smart stewards of the police bureau. So kind of taking a look at where the bottlenecks are, things like getting just people through their background investigations. I also do think that we have to reinvent policing a little bit. I'm sure some of you are here today to talk about Portland Street Response, which is a new way to respond to basically houseless people who are going through mental health crises. Historically, we've sent out cops for that. One of the things I think that it's important for us to do is get the cops out of the business of policing houseless people. And we're, as you know, we're piloting that out in Lentz. There's a lot of great work that's being done there, but it's also complicated, especially as you take that from one neighborhood to 95 neighborhoods. And one of the things that one of the ways I spend my days is working with staff, both over at 911 and in the police bureau and in the mayor's office and in all the other offices that are interested in this, just to make sure that we get this right, because when we send out Portland Street Response, one of the things we want to do is to be able to connect, our houseless neighbors who are going through crisis with real services. But if the county hasn't stood up services to kind of help these people, we've only solved half the problem, but instead, probably it's more accurate to say that we haven't solved the problem yet. So there's a lot of work that needs to be done there. I think this is the first budget in a long time where we begin to make progress. We actually have started to add police officers back. There's a lot of work left to be done. I won't lie to you about that, and I won't minimize how big the challenges are, but I'll also tell you that I see that as being one of the major problems that the city has to solve.
Yeah, well, thank you. One final comment. We do need a culture change in law enforcement, not just here, but nationally.
Yep.
And culture change always comes from within.
Yeah.
And when an institution is attacked, it does not change. It freezes up and goes to war.
Yeah.
I would strongly encourage you to encourage your other members on council to not engage in attacks if we want culture change.
I agree
Thank
with you. Let me, believe me, I'm working on it.
Great. All right, thank you. We are going to move on to Eric Liebman next with Autumn West on deck.
Hey, Eric, let me find you on my screen. We have Eric?
Oh, okay. There you have me now. How's
Oh,
that?
there you are.
Okay, that's me and my pug is hiding behind me. There he is. Okay.
Hey, buddy. Hey, Puggy.
I have a question about your plans, present and future, for dealing with the city's homeless population. One question I have is, assuming a variety or combination of any of your methods works, do we have to be concerned about the possibility of then Portland becoming a magnet for homeless from other parts of the country, who then see the variety of services that we're offering, especially even if they work locally, then they just possibly become then attractive for other people from outside the state, and then we end up, well, you see what I'm asking.
Yeah, I totally understand what you're saying, and you know, this is almost a good problem to have, because what you say about homelessness is also true about business and people who want to raise a family. Portland is just fundamentally a really desirable place to live. You know, one of the things I think has happened over the past year and a half is houselessness is really, we've not really intervened to kind of mitigate the sort of bad effects of houselessness because of COVID. I do think that as we begin to, you know, clean up the streets, create some parameters around where it's appropriate to camp and where it's not appropriate to camp, some of that dynamic will begin to change. One of the other things that I think is actually going to make things a lot better in terms of what you're specifically concerned about is a recent Metro bond that we passed that will help fund houseless services, not only in Multnomah County, but in the surrounding counties. So, you know, essentially, I believe like about half of the houseless folks in Oregon congregate in Portland. And one of the reasons why that happens is that Portland is the place that that provides funding and the best services for folks unlucky enough to live on the street. But one of the things that will begin to change, and frankly, I think it will begin to change with this fiscal year, which began about 2 weeks ago, is that you know, the surrounding counties will actually have a funding source to provide services for, you know, houseless people in those communities. And so I think that will actually begin to help a little bit with the issues that
I hope it all succeeds. I still have the possibly unanswerable open-ended question of what happens if we become victims of our own success.
Yes, well,
there may not be an answer to that, but to see the crest of the very happy and congratulatory wave on the hill and coming in our direction.
Well, I hear you, Eric. And if the legacy of my if the legacy of our tenure here is that we've just gotten incredibly successful at serving the houseless community, you know, that would be an okay problem to have. But, you know, I think that we should think about this both in terms of maybe a carrot and a stick. I think it's incredibly important that we provide services that help people kind of recover. You know, there are lots of reasons why people are houseless. I think it's incredibly important as a policy issue and a humanitarian issue that we provide people with the services that we need. And I think it's also important that Portland begin to create some norms and boundaries about houseless behavior, which is inappropriate. So, and we haven't done that largely for the past year and a half. A lot of that's due to COVID. That is also beginning to change. I think it was 2 weeks ago, so Portland City Council passed a new set of rules that actually place some parameters around where it's appropriate to camp and where it's not appropriate to camp. So starting, probably starting at the end of this month, I believe. It's no longer appropriate to camp adjacent to a school. You can't camp within 10 feet of of the entrance to a business. So we're beginning to get those kind of parameters there. And what I really hope is that our sister cities begin to adopt a similar policy. I expect these to work
That's
here.
that's what I was wondering, if there could perhaps shoot for some sort of unanimity in terms of the type and the quality and the amount of services provided on a per capita basis by the major cities.
Yeah,
So no one city ends up being the attracting beacon on the hill for everybody,
yeah.
and everybody goes to that city, and better to distribute the burden equally.
I couldn't agree with you more, but I do think there's hope there in Metro's houselessness bond. One of the things that will finally give our sister cities the opportunity to do is to begin to provide some of these services in their own borders. So I'm less afraid of that than I used to be, but we'll have to wait and see.
All right.
Well,
And it's time.
you have the
Yep.
plug vote in hand, in paw.
Thank you.
Thank you, Eric.
All right.
We're gonna move on to Autumn West next with Jeff Rempfer on deck.
Hi, Autumn.
Hi, thank you. So I am one of those people that does not feel safe in Portland. I live in Lentz, and where, by the way, we pay the highest per value assessed taxes. And I am not against, so half of my family is Black, and obviously I want Black people to be safe, but since we defunded police, we've had constant drive-by shootings, and more Black people have died in Portland since we defunded the police than before.
Yeah.
And I'm not anti-homeless, but what I don't understand is why I have to follow the rules and why other people can say, I'm homeless, I don't want to follow rules. We have theft is rampant around here. I have a drug dealer down the street chopping cars. I get needles and feces in my yard. I live near the MUP next to the elementary school, and we have fires constantly. We have RVs blowing up. We just had a big RV on Crystal Springs and 92nd, where the guy had been threatening people. He'd been drug dealing, chopping vehicles. Crime is just out of control and nothing gets done. And literally, unless you call the police and say someone's holding a gun to my head, nothing will happen. That's if you can even get through 911. And street response is not working. I could tell you all kinds of stories of either it's not, they don't work on the weekends or it's after hours. And I've seen cases where, someone's having a fit in the middle of the street. They come and bring them a granola bar and a bottle of water. And then 5 hours later, they're still in the middle of the street screaming.
Yeah.
And so, number one, what are my taxes even paying for? And number two, why do certain people, so I would see my neighborhood is the poor working class, and because they're not going and stealing from the rich neighborhoods because they'd get caught there, they'd stick out like a sore thumb. And so it's like we feel like we're the sacrificial lamb. We feel like Lentz is like, oh, it's outer Southeast Portland, nobody cares, push it out here, like 2016 on the Springwater corridor, push them all out to Lentz. And my neighbor just got his scooter stolen, who was his only ride to work. My other neighbor had her car stolen twice. Catalytic converters are getting stolen like crazy. And we're the people who can't afford to replace that.
Yeah.
And why don't I get to say, I don't want to obey the rules and not pay my taxes? When homeless people can say, I don't want to obey the rules, I don't want to go to a shelter, I get to do whatever I want.
Well, Autumn, I hear your frustration, and I know it's real. Sadly, the challenges that you face are also being faced throughout the city. You should see the barrage of emails I get every day from, the wealthy neighbors who live adjacent to Laurelhurst Park. So unfortunately, this is now an equal.
Yeah, but they have, well, sorry.
Yeah, but and it's not. I mean, the point here is that this is a citywide problem, and frankly, it's a citywide failure. I do think we've turned a corner here. It's obviously true that COVID had a big impact here. One of the things that happened during COVID is that we didn't do any mitigation around houselessness issues. Like if you go back even a year or two ago, you might have actually had cops go to.
Before COVID.
Yes, which is also, I completely agree. And that's actually why City Council stood up the Portland Street Response in Lentz, is because in fact, I remember this moment, it was before I was on council, but one of the reasons why we placed Portland Street Response in Lentz was because of the challenges that you folks faced out there. But you are also right. We need to do a better job of protecting, everyday Portlanders. One of the things I do want to say, though, is that being houseless isn't a crime. Although, people who live in houses commit crimes, and houseless people also commit crimes. One of the things I'm really trying to get our city back in the business of is having a police department and a public safety system that actually enforces the laws and some basic norms of neighborliness. And we are beginning to move in that direction.
I'm sorry to interrupt you again. Being
Sure.
house is not a crime, but when you see piles of chopped bikes, when you see obvious drug dealing and prostitution, when you see obvious illegal, all kinds of illegal activity. I'm not asking anyone to be arrested for being homeless, but why can they not be arrested for criminal activity that is being committed?
Well, part of what's happening in the city right now is our police department has shrunk to the point that there's some prioritization that happens. And right now, our police department is as small as it's been since the 1990s. And frankly, gun violence in the city is as high as it's ever been, at least since the 1990s. We're basically back to the bad old days of the crack epidemic. So the police bureau has been prioritizing our most violent crimes. We've actually stood up a special unit that responds specifically to gun crimes. So that's kind of where our top priority has been. I'll also say that as we exit the COVID era, I expect the police department and other city bureaus to be much more involved in mitigating some of the kind of challenges that you have talked about. So there has been no sort of towing of cars for the past year or so, which are associated with houseless camps and whatnot. There's been not enough cleaning of illegal dumping. All of that is actually beginning to change. And, it's not just about creating sticks, and it's not just about creating making more arrests. One of the things that we're actually also trying to do is create new options for people, finding places for folks to go. So you might have heard about Commissioner Ryan standing up 6 new organized camps, which will give people who are open to services a place to go. And the change that I expect us to see over the course of the next year is, for the past year, we haven't been intervening in houseless camps very much at all, partly because of COVID and, or mostly because of COVID, frankly, and partly because of our police department being so small. Moving forward, one of the things that we're going to see is we'll actually have some organized, humane places for houseless people to go. So there's going to be much more outreach saying, hey folks, this is number one, that you can't camp here. You can't camp adjacent to a school. You can't camp in a park. You can't, sleep on the sidewalk, but we have options for you to go to these other places.
And what about the multi-use path in the Springwater corridor which runs through my neighborhood? And what are you going to do about the ones who are service resistant, who are the ones who are out here, who are the people that are literally terrorizing us?
I'm familiar with both of those spaces. And one of the important things is, first, we wanted to create options for people in terms of, for people who want help and are open to help. we want to create places for them to go. And then we have folks who, are, setting up illegal chop shops on public lands and in public spaces. And for those folks, there will come a moment very soon where we will say, we will actually start holding people accountable. And that's a culture change, which I see, we have 5 members of council. Probably every member owns a piece of how the houselessness problem to some degree. And I see all 5 members to some degree or another recognize that this is the new direction that we need to go in. And we've actually set up both the funding and the sort of legal infrastructure to move in that direction. So I know how challenging it is out there in Lentz, and frankly, there's no excuse for it. I do hope that you hear the possibility that hope and progress is on the way.
Well, I'm gonna hold my breath.
All right, I understand.
We're going to move on to Jeff Rempfer next, and then Heather Flint Shadow on deck.
Good, thank you.
Hey,
And
Jeff.
I forgot your name, Katie. Thank you, Katie. Good job facilitating. And first, thank you, Commissioner, and your staff for putting this on. This is a rarity in Portland, having been fairly active in my neighborhood association and trying to get responses from the council, and even to come to a meeting has been, an uphill struggle in my 30-some years as a Portlander. I do live in the Argay Terrace neighborhood, and have lived there for over 20 years, and have seen that neighborhood go downhill just because of crime and homelessness. Can I say homeless, or is it houseless?
We understand.
I missed the memo when that changed. Sorry. But again, thank you very much. And
Of course.
I would just to tag on to many of the people, I don't think COVID is our biggest concern. I think crime is our biggest concern. And as much as I would like to empathize with the houseless population, I do think most people on this call would agree that there's some people who are mentally ill who you will never get into a house. There's also the habitual drug users, which I think most of us are very fearful of.
Yeah.
And as they come into and move into our neighborhoods, Argay, as you well might know, had a pipe bomb thrown under an RV that was supposedly a meth manufacturing, right? That was parked next to Argay Park for months before, I
remember.
Anyway, we're all frustrated with that, and we appreciate that you're actually here to talk to us in person, so to speak. So,
Well, thank you.
I would ask that,
Sure.
that all the police in the world aren't going to help some issues. Education is a key for keeping people out of crime and from not doing drugs. It's a statistical fact that if you have a high school diploma, your chances of being a criminal or a drug addict are severely reduced. So I'd like to see you in particular get our public schools back on track. I think we've lost our way on educating people. We don't graduate people who can even read anymore.
Yeah.
And that would be a huge thing. But also, what's the point of having police if we have a district attorney who doesn't prosecute criminality? How many Antifa members were thrown in jail and released and never charged for burning down our city? And I'm not afraid to say their name. I don't care if they know who I am. Maybe I do, because but I'd like to see the council step up and ask the district attorney to start doing his job.
Well, thanks for Jeff. Number one, thanks for those kind words. It's actually a real honor for me to meet with people like this. I miss the days when we could do it in person, and those days are coming again. And I hear your story. I'm a Park Rose guy at heart, and I've seen how your neighborhood and neighborhoods adjacent to you have changed in recent years. I'll also say that I'm a recovering educator myself, and I believe that education is the key to transforming lives and economies and cities. So I'm completely with you on that. School board, of course, or our various school boards in Portland are their own government entities, but partly because when I'm not doing this, I'm usually a political science professor. I'm deeply engaged and spend a lot of time talking to my peers on school boards, and we do what we can to work together to educate our kids. And, you know, you probably in the background have seen I have a 10-year-old and a 12-year-old who haven't been in school for about a year and a half. And I know how that has impacted their lives, and I fear, and they are relatively privileged kids, so I fear for Portland kids out there who don't have the advantages that they do. And I share your frustration with the district attorney, or I have at various times. I also like the district attorney. I talk to him not infrequently, and I've shared much of what you I've shared with him some of my perspectives, which look a lot like your perspectives. And one of the things that is hopeful here, and I do think, and I hope one of the messages you take away from this meeting today is that there is hope for Portland. The district attorney has become much more effective at actually bringing prosecutions in relationship, especially to property crimes. One of the big changes that hasn't really been remarked on in Portland, especially around, let's take the protests and whatnot, is that the police are making far fewer arrests on protest nights, but the arrests that are being made are actually being prosecuted. So that is really a good sign and a sign of a good government. And I'll share a fact with you. And this has evolved, but even when the district attorney, even when we would make arrests for people who were breaking windows or whatnot, one of the things that we found when we got to court is that a third of those arrests were being ultimately not pursued because the people who were breaking the windows and setting buildings on fire, the court found were mentally ill, too ill to stand trial, which also is just a real sign of where we are as a community. You know, when I probably before I got into this job, I looked at homelessness and kind of thought that Portland has a profound houselessness problem. And I've actually spent a fair bit of my career dealing with the houseless community, but now that I'm in this job and really am in the thick of houseless issues, all day, every day, I realize the degree to which houselessness is really a mental health problem. And until we get a handle on that, it's going to be an awfully long uphill battle. You know, the city can build as many houses, affordable houses and organized camps as you can imagine, but if people still suffer from schizophrenia or drug addiction, we're still going to have enormous challenges. I talk to members of in Portland. The county largely provides mental health services and drug and alcohol services. And I'm in dialogue with our colleagues over on the Multnomah County Board of Commissioners, certainly every week. We're working together on this. Some good progress is being made there, but there's also a lot of work left to be done.
I had one other question, but I'll pass on it since other people are waiting.
Thank you, Jeff. Yeah, we have quite a line and about 15, 20 minutes left. So we'll, Heather Flint Shadow is next with Lynn Felton on deck.
Hi, Heather.
Hi there.
How you doing?
I'm good. Thank you so much for hosting this forum and the
Of course.
forums that you're doing. I really appreciate it. I put a note in the chat about encouraging return to the citywide summit that I know Office of Neighborhood Involvement, before they changed their name, used to do. And I think that was a really wonderful forum because there are so many big issues that we all want to talk about tonight. And, you know, some issues may feel more important than others. So I hope that we can encourage that to come back so that you know, different tracks can get the attention that they really need, where we really want to dig in on certain topics, but we don't shortchange all of the things that we're juggling with as a city. So as an urban planner, I'm used to juggling a lot of those topics,
Sure.
and including being a parent. It's my
I understand.
interrupted. I wanted to say, as we're, talking about, houseless issues, one of the things that we're really looking at are how can we be fostering more innovative models to address these solutions. And, we're working on a model we're hoping is a replicable model for affordable housing that's adaptive sites that could unlock more land that's already has a little bit of development on it,
Sure.
but is underdeveloped, and to be able to not just do one-offs, but to create a pathway for innovative housing to happen in a variety of different forms. This is one that's called Art Farm, that is a tiny house artist eco-village that's intended to be net zero. And we don't want to just skirt the pathway, just to get it. We want to make something that's replicable. So we've proposed an innovative housing demonstration policy. And I know as part of Shelter to Housing Continuum, there wasn't as much room to look at that, but I would love to encourage the council to really take a little time to look at what we saw as a precedent from the city of Redmond and use that format to look at a variety of different housing typologies that we may not have enough examples of. So this is just one example. I think, go ahead. I think another piece I just want to mention, and I have to jump over to my neighborhood association meeting, so I really wanted to talk to you to stay on,
Sure.
is I as a 20-year urban planner, environmental designer, and become a community advocate as I live near Division and saw a lot of growth and change without communities having a voice.
Right.
And I think there's a real concern, I see nodding heads, that Portland is it's changing so quickly, but communities don't feel like they have a role and a voice in that change.
Yeah.
And that we're sort of building a city that maybe is losing a little bit of its soul. Are we losing our identity, our authenticity? And so I hear other people saying, how do we get our vision back? We've been so excited about Portland. That's why I came here, as a mecca for innovation and sustainability. And so I hope that we can really foster that. And, I've sent Sam Adams a list of our top 7 innovative policies. I'd love to talk to you about that. One of those is the innovative housing demonstration policy. The other is the community-based planning policy, because we've done 7 years of work on Division because there were no tools for us. There were no design guidelines. There were no resources for us, but there's now no pathway for that community-led planning. And so we said, well, how could we make one? So how could Portland be an innovator in a community-based planning policy? So, and then I'll just share one last idea with you. I'd love to, come talk
Sure.
to you more about these proposals, but the image behind me is, if I can move my body a little bit, this is the kiosk strategy that Lisbon uses, where they have these incredible, if I can back up, these incredible kiosks that have a vendor in the front and a
Yep.
bathroom in the back. And our proposal is to add the solar, and we have a solar partner that has a stockpile of redeployable emergency batteries. So these could be resiliency hubs. And what they found is that they make safer places. They make places that are dead spaces active. They've activated their parks and plazas, but they can also work for things like houseless villages. And so I would like to encourage us to think more innovatively and creatively about how we can address both the community side. Are we building the plazas that go with the density? Are we building respectfully next to history? Are we really being responsive to the climate impacts of demolition? So I would like to see us being really innovative. And I think you're the person to do it. And I want to thank you for your leadership on some Main Street standards. It was a small win, but I hope you take on a phase 2 with that, because there's more to be done. And I want to just leave you with the last 2 thoughts, and I appreciate your listening, that I think we really need a sustainable design center on the east side where community members can come, because really all of our work with PX Main Streets is about sustainability, that people can come when they need support. around shaping a vision or doing a project. And that's what our intention is to really give people those tools. And our ABCs plus D and E for design, demolition, and displacement and equity. That's the training we think really is needed. That's not over the head up here, you know,
Right.
high level that the city does right now, but that is really where communities are at, and also has an embedded train the trainers program. And that we can really support communities with a little bit more of that vision and leadership that we're so famous for. And I hope that you will take on a phase 2 of DOZA, because communities have not been as engaged. They care passionately about our city, but they can't track it when it's so technical. And so I hope that you will, as Historic Resources Code policy comes out, that document just came out, I hope people will look at that, because if we don't take care of the places that we love most, we start to lose a lot of what we think of as our authentic places of our city. So I really hope that we can continue the conversation, and
Well,
appreciate all you're doing.
we absolutely will. And thank you so much for sharing all that, Heather. It's always a pleasure to talk to you and catch up with all the innovative projects that you're working on these days. One of the things that I might ask you to do is if you have write-ups on any of these issues, if you could email it over to my office, and we can maybe find a time to follow up and maybe offer some advice on how we can move forward
That would
on
be
some
great.
of these issues.
Thank you for that invitation. I
Of
would love to do
course.
that.
Hey,
All right, thank you so much.
Can't wait till we talk again.
All right, thanks so much.
Thank
Bye.
you. Bye. Okay, Lynn Felton is next, and Monica Corey is on deck. Monica might end up being our last one for tonight. We're getting close on time, but let's go ahead with
I wouldn't
Lynn.
mind going a couple of minutes later if I know
Okay,
people
I just want
working
to set
the,
expectations
Yeah,
in case
yeah.
it goes long.
Sure.
But let's start with Lynn.
Hello, and
Hi,
I wanna
Lynn.
say hi. Thank you for having this opportunity for us to be able to speak to council. I know weekly that opportunity is present, but as you can understand, that can be a pretty daunting format for many citizens.
Sure.
So my question is, since we have a police force that is the smallest since the 1990s, what specifically is the city of Portland doing to attract and retain police officers? Because one of the biggest blocks, it seems, out in the public is brand Portland. Because if I'm a police officer, I sure wouldn't feel welcome in brand Portland. And further, one of the key stakeholders in brand Portland is the council. And you're all human, yet I've never seen all of you together. And maybe you could leave out one person who maybe strongly disagrees with you, but I have never seen, and you're welcome to correct me if I'm wrong, all of you out in front of the cameras in one voice, being very clear about Portland and the safety of Portland citizens. And I'm wondering, why does that not go on? Because from an outside perspective, and I understand the government works differently,
All right.
but from an outside citizen's perspective, we never see the council unified. We see the council throwing each other under the bus. We never see the council speaking at one voice. We see the mayor out there taking lots of falls.
Yeah.
And that's, you know, everybody can have their opinion about that. But if our government is council, then why don't we see our council speaking in one voice to the citizens about the problems of Portland and what is being done to solve them? So I guess I had two questions. What's being done to retain police and attract them? And why does the council not help brand Portland and come out and speak in one voice? And the final part of that is, you're a political science professor. You well know that our crime statistics are going to be front and center come the 2022 elections. And Portland is not going to be helping the storyline for the Democrats. Portland is going to be really helping the storyline and narrative for the Republicans. So I don't understand why at a macro level, we continue to act as we do in order for that narrative to continue. So there.
Thank you for those observations and questions. Let me start with what we're doing to attract and retain police officers. Number one of the things that I take very personally, I think people forget that police officers are public servants, just like people who work in 911 or parks and whatnot. I care very much about employee well-being. One of the things that we are putting together right now and really looking hard at are the how well we support and take care of these individual officers. I kind of come from a community policing background, so I know many, especially street level officers, from years and years of working together to try to solve some basic problems. And I know that these are human beings who actually do the work because they really want to make a difference. And I want to make sure that the city is providing them with the moral and mental support that they need to show up to work every day. We'll see some reforms along those lines coming up fairly soon. You also asked, why doesn't our council come together with one voice around policing and support for the police? I think, frankly, your question also embedded the answer. We have 5 very different people on council. I think if you go back to our last council, you would often see that group of people really undermining each other and kind of throwing each other under the bus. You see much less of that in this current council. And one of the reasons why you see much less of that is because I think everyone learned some lessons from the last council, and there's a new commitment to kind of working together to try to push forward constructive solutions. But at the same time, frankly, let's put it this way, the way the mayor thinks about public safety issues and policing is very different from how Commissioner Hardesty, for example, thinks about public safety and policing. Actually, a lot of votes in city council are 5-0 votes, and it takes a lot of hard work to get to that consensus. And the voice that you hear coming from this current council actually reflects an awful lot of hard work behind the scenes efforts by myself and people like Katie and Yvette and my other staff to try to find the middle ground that actually moves the discussion forward. If I were king and making pronouncements about how we should support policing, it would sound a little bit different from what you see out of this current council. I really do view police officers as being public servants. I think it's honorable work. I think it's indispensable work. I know most of the folks who do it because they really want to make a difference. I don't know if that's the first sentence that would come out of every other member of council's mouth, but I also do think that they believe that it's important, that policing is important. I haven't heard anyone on council say that they have a vision for Portland without policing.
I'm sorry to interrupt you, but then why can't you come out and say at least that altogether?
I think that other folks have different priorities. Certainly, I see a balance between the need for, and I don't think it's an either or choice. I think we need to move forward with both reform and improve police protection. I think other folks think that what we need to do is really move forward with racial reform around policing, and there's a vision that if we accomplish that problem, all the other problems will go away. I think that even if we had a police department which was had no failings around racial equity, we would still have shootings and all these other issues. But I don't think that everyone on council has that specific point of view. I think other folks, and this is a good question, how much of our public safety problem can we get solved through prevention programs versus how much of it can we get solved through enforcement? I think we need to have a balanced approach. On the other hand, I think some other folks might say we just really need to lead 1,000% with with prevention. And I think if you take a look at,
But so I hear what you're saying, and that all goes into micro and very valid, difficult issues that take very real, long conversations of coming together and talking through. Understand that. A council, a government leading a city coming out and saying, we recognize the police serve the people and we're thankful for their job, or however politically you want to say it. Why is that so terribly difficult? Because we all know politics is also a show. What you're talking about is behind the scenes, the negotiations, the very difficult part. But the show part and the branding by the council hasn't been done as far as I see. And I'm wondering, why is it so terribly difficult? It takes very simple to get in front of a camera and make one sentence and make a police force who are humans feel like they're valued. So why is that so difficult?
well, I can only speak for myself, and I think I have said that from the day I got into this office, and frankly, I think my first press conference was before I got into this office, where I said very much issues like that. And it probably would be wise to really get to the answer to your question. You probably actually need to talk to the commissioners who haven't said that yet. Is the answer. And to address the last piece of your question, does Portland's challenges around providing for public safety and does our crime problem hurt our brand? It sure does. And that's why getting policing right is one of my top priorities.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
So we have Monica Corey up next, and if you're willing to stay a little longer, we'll finish it off with Ann McMullen.
Okay.
Okay, Monica.
Hey,
She's
Monica,
trapped.
you're on mute.
How about now?
We hear you loud and clear.
Okay, look, I'm sitting on the Columbia River.
Oh, wow.
I'm at the Sexton having dinner, and I've been listening to you the whole time. And I appreciate everything that you've said, all your responses, and I appreciate all the amazing questions and statements that everybody on this call has made, because I've underscored almost every one of them. And so we've covered the big issues. We know what they are. It's come forward, the transcript will point it out. But one that it seems almost minor in retrospect, our city is filthy, dirty. You never see street sweepers running. You never see trash pickup. When I was a kid, used to see, you'd see the street sweepers every week, every 2 weeks. You never see it. It's filthy. Every neighborhood, every street. A couple of years ago, every year I work with the Hood to Coast, and we do the walk.
yeah.
We walk under the bridge on the east side, and there's 1,000 people walking, and it is so gross. Can we get a power washer down there? Anything to clean? It's disgusting. And that's just a sidebar. And if you've got Bureau of Environmental Services, put that on the list, because our city is disgusting, besides the impact of the houseless, the criminal, and the mentally ill. Period. That's my question.
Well, great question, Monica. And I hear you. I was actually out at, I think, 6 in the morning, I think last Thursday, with Clean and Safe, literally power washing buildings downtown. I know I've never seen Portland as trashed as it is right now, but I also think this is a good news story too. Although Portland is a little bit rough right now, we actually have made some really significant progress in getting teams out to clean up. We have Solve Oregon, which organizes volunteer cleanups. They've cleaned up hundreds of tons of trash at this point. We've made big investments in cleaning the city. Kind of what happened for a year and a half is we didn't have people out there picking up, especially around houseless camps. That has definitely changed.
But I'm talking about the sidewalks in the streets, even before COVID. It's just been grungier and grungier.
Yeah, well,
There's any going on.
I hear you on that. I don't know if you've been downtown lately, It's still rough, but it's so much better than it was. And we're working not just downtown, we're working in East Portland and in North Portland and literally in every section of the city. I rarely make promises, but this is one of the things that I think is really true. We're deeply committed to getting the trash picked up. We've made a big investment in it. We have a plan to get it done. Sam Adams, who's actually ran against me for this seat and now is a great friend, is working in the mayor's office, helping to coordinate these services. I'm actually strongly confident that we are going to get Portland cleaned up. It'll take some time. There are literally hundreds of tons of trash out there, but I think over the course of the next 18 months or so, all right, let's put it this way. I think 18 months from now, the city is going to look fundamentally different than it does today. We're kind of cranking through it.
All right. Well, thank you for that. And thank you for all you're doing. And
Sure.
I have to say that lack of a unity as a statement, I said that last summer when everything was flying and our riots were going on, if the city council had stood on the federal steps and said, we hear you, we are going to work to reforming our police, everybody go home, it might've made a difference. But instead, everybody just kind of cowered and let the element continue, but that's history. Goodbye. Thank you. Love you.
Bye-bye. Enjoy your dinner, Monica.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, Monica. Okay, so final question from Ann McMullen.
Actually, since Mingus, I think you're coming to our meeting this week, I thought I would let somebody else ask a question that still got their hand raised because I will ask Mingus on Wednesday.
Okay, great.
Okay, great. Then Denise, are you still on?
I am.
Great to hear your voice, Denise. How are you?
Hi, Commissioner.
Oh, there
Mouse.
you
Thank
are.
you. Yes. Thank you so much for hosting this and being here. So I have
Sure.
a few things to ask and to make requests. And one of my requests would be what will happen for mom and pop landlords who were not able to cash in on the federal housing funding or any funds because tenants refused to fill out the declaration of hardship because they weren't having a hardship. So since I'm one of those mom pop landlords, the tenants trashed my place, $15,000 to $20,000 worth of damages
Oh, I'm so
that's
sorry.
been done to my place that I am in the process of trying to personally rehab myself. And they moved out on the 15th of April, and I am still trying to fix everything. And it's just been a nightmare because they didn't pay their rent for February, March, and April. They didn't pay their garbage bills. They put garbage in the yard debris can, garbage in the recycle can, and they put garbage in the crawl space. They put water in the crawl space, and they put needles, drug needles in the sewer line. I had to have drug needles cleaned out, and I'm, wonder what is that doing to our environment?
Yeah.
And I want to talk about the accountability piece, and that I'm saying from our governor on down that I've been trying to, have a conversation with Governor Brown as well. I think we're extending the tenant moratoriums too much. And yes, one time I was homeless first as a single person, homeless with a baby, and then the Lord blessed me to be able to work and buy a home and then become a landowner. So I think we do not push the agenda forward of individuals' home ownership is something that I think this city needs to invest in. And I also think that we should continue the classes that were canceled, the landlord tenant classes, because there's a whole lot of horror stories going on. We can talk about, low income and housing, but no one is talking about the accountability piece. And when people are leaving, your tenants are leaving your properties just trashed. And if I wanted to rent it, I couldn't rent it, turn around and rent it because of all of the damages. But none of that is being addressed. I don't even know who to contact. I've been on the website, on all the websites that everybody claims that landlords can go to fill out the application. But if there is no declaration of hardship form to upload to that application, mom pop landlords or mega landlords will not get one dime of the 80% of your rent. And so I happen to be a little bit frustrated. I've been a landlord for like 16 years, but this takes the case. And so when you've got landlords saying they'll never rent again in Multnomah County, in the city of Portland, because you can't get, there's no equitable treatment. There's no equity even in the law that's been put forward. So I'd like to see the landlord tenant classes return that they were having on Saturdays at Concordia University that we used to do, and over at the Providence Auditorium. I still have my handbooks. I thought those were very, very beneficial. And I think that is something that needs to return to Portland. And now I want to speak to the houselessness piece. Just because a person is homeless or houseless, it doesn't mean that an individual has to go around committing crimes, even though we're seeing a lot of crime in our cities, and we're seeing just a lot of things happening. And I'm not a police basher, because I think they're public servants, just like I'm a public servant, and we need them and have lots of them in my family. So I think, yes, our city can do things better to not defund our police officers, but give officers what they need, but change the training, the dynamics of the training, to say that we're not going to do chokeholds, or we're not going to do this type when we stop, or we are not going to profile. And I don't think just the police thing is the issue. I really believe it's living wages. It's a equity gap for the wealth. There's jobs, there's school, there's across the board just a myriad of issues that are just simply not being addressed. And it seems like we want to put everything in one little bottle that says that it's the police doing everything. No, I want to thrive. I want to survive. I want to thrive. I know there are others that want to thrive. So if others want to thrive, that means give them living wage jobs. Look throughout your bureaus and find out where can we hire individuals that necessarily don't even look like us, but where can we hire individuals, not just in our bureaus, but just in, the federal building. I just wish I could have told the protesters about Senator Mark O. Hatfield, who was present in my life at age 6, who they honored today at the Oregon Historical Society. They don't even know the contribution that he made to this city, just so that Black and brown people could even live in Portland, Oregon, while they're down here tearing up the federal building. So I've been out on the corners down at the police station with a bullhorn, telling them, the protesters, get off the street. You don't even know this used to be Fred Meyer's where you're standing. We had to march in 1960 just to get a Black man a job to work at Fred Meyer's. So there's just a myriad of issues that undercurrent. And I know, Mingus, you're one person, and I just know it's collectively it will take all of us to assist you and the council as well. I'm here. I mean, I'm doing what I can do, even in my little sphere of influence. I'm doing what I can do. So if we all do what we can do, I think our city will and can return to how our city, how we used to thrive in this city. So I depend on my neighbors. We don't even call the police. I have wonderful neighbors, good neighborhood watch, and I would like to even assist in helping people and showing them the ropes of home ownership and how you don't even have to be out here on the street. You can go from the street to owning a home. That's all. Thank you.
Well, Denise, number one, I am so sorry for the losses you suffered over at your rental property. That breaks my heart. I also know that you're not alone. I hope there's some good news here. I think over the course of my 6 months on council, there's been, let's put it this way, an increased sensitivity to some of the challenges faced by small landlords. I think if you go back in time, we were mostly focused on rental assistance. Since I've been on council, we've been more focused on rental assistance and assistance especially to mom and pop landlords. There is also some good news on the horizon. This council still has a fair bit of federal relief dollars from COVID. A big hunk of that is going to go to help stabilize the housing market. I expect some of it to go to, or, you know, a hunk of it will go to rental assistance and a hunk of it will go to landlords. And one of the things I will definitely do is to check in with Commissioner Ryan around the rules about for how landlords can access those funds, especially if you don't have someone who declares a hardship. So if you write my office, or I can write you and let you know the current status of that, I think we'll be making some big decisions on the next batch of assistance to renters and mom and pop landlords on the 28th of this month, maybe. So help is coming soon. I'll do everything I can to make sure. This is frankly not the first time I've heard this. One of the things that I've heard is that, especially for a small mom and pop, navigating our current regulatory environment, let's put it this way, around you know, renting, especially renting affordable housing, is just really challenging, and there's not enough support there. One of the things I'm kind of challenging the Housing Bureau on is to make sure that we remember both renters and we remember the people who provide housing.
Right.
So
Thank you so much.
Sure. Thank you.
All right. Well, thank you everyone for coming tonight. Commissioner, do you want to just close us out for the night?
Well, it breaks my heart that I know the people who are running this meeting actually are trapped in City Hall and need to catch buses home. So I would stay longer, but the people who are running the machine should get home to their kids. Thank you so much for coming out tonight. I apologize I can't get to every question. If you could send your question to me in the chat or to my office, I promise we'll get back to you. We also have events like this, I think, happening every month, Katie?
Every other month. Yes.
Every other month. This is not the last opportunity for us to connect. If we missed you this time, we'll definitely reach out to you and make sure that we hear your voice the next time we come together at a forum like this. And let me tell you, I've heard your frustrations around policing. I've heard your frustrations around houselessness. And I've heard your frustrations around the rental markets, and I've heard your frustrations around litter. And you're not alone. Everyone in the city has a similar set of concerns. These are also my top priorities. I try to tell you the truth when I come and talk to you in forums like this. And I think the truth is, although we have a lot of work to do, some really important work has been done. I believe progress is happening. It's not in the future that it's going to happen. I think progress is happening right now. I expect that by the time we get to the end of the summer, the city that we all love will be in much better shape. It will also take time to heal. It took us about 16 months, if not more, to get in this hole, and digging out is probably going to take another 16 months. But, you know, as a guy who's been around Portland for a long, long time, one of the things I've noticed is that, you know, no one has ever made money by betting against Portland. Our city is bouncing back, and our future is going to be brighter than it's ever been. So please hang in there, have hope. If you have concerns that you want to share with us, that's what we're here for. Please email our office and continue to come to events like this. And thank you so much for taking time out of your evening to engage in this really important conversation. I really appreciate you. All right. Thank you. Good night.